You may know Seoul as a vast modern industrial city that's at the forefront of much technological change. But do you know how it happened to be this way? In this digital story, we will discuss Seoul's early history, its independence from Japan, its division within Korea, and its road to modernization. Even though we have archaeological evidence that people have been living in area known as Seoul since prehistoric times, there was no historical mention of any settlement there. Until the first century, when the settlement was at the meeting point of the ancient three kingdoms, the area modern-day Seoul was relatively small until 1068, when a king built a summer palace. Over the next 3 centuries, Seoul gradually grew into a relatively large city and was made the capital of Joseon Dynasty. The Joseon Dynasty was incredibly cautious about the protection because, for centuries, the Korean peninsula had weathered many attacks from China and Japan. The Joseon Dynasty cared so deeply about protecting the Korean people and culture that they closed the country to foreigners and built their own Great Wall. During the time Seoul was the capital of Joseon, it went by the name Hanseong, which means Fortress City of the Han River. The Joseon Dynasty gave Seoul that name because in 1396 they started construction on the fortress wall of Seoul, which stretched over 18 kilometers and had a 6-meter fortress to help protect the city from foreign invaders. After the Joseon Dynasty fell in 1879, the Korean Empire took over and kept Seoul as the capital. Under the Korean Empire, Seoul was open to the outside world and modernized fast. In less than 10 years, Seoul became the first East Asian city to have things like trolley cars, telephone, and water systems all at the same time. However, the prosperity experience under the Korean Empire was very short-lived. In 1910, Seoul was formally annexed by Japan, which gave Japan complete control over the city. The Japanese used Seoul as the capital of their colonial rule, and they imported even more modern technology. They paved roads, took down old walls and gates, and built Western-style skyscrapers. The Korean people were incredibly unhappy about being subjugated by Japan because they were treated very poorly. Luckily, Japan left Korea for good on August 15, 1945, at the end of World War II. August 15th became a memorable day for the Korean people, and it is celebrated as a national holiday today. However, the problems did not stop there. When Japan was in charge, Korea became fundamentally divided as the North started to embrace communist ideologies, and the South did not. So when the Japanese left, the two halves of Korea became physically divided into two different states, with Seoul becoming the capital of capitalist South Korea. The newly founded North Korean government was not happy about the divide and wanted to hold power over the entire peninsula. In 1950, they invaded and captured Seoul, sparking the Korean War. During the 3 years of the war, Seoul changed hands between North and South Korea a total of 4 times. And all that conflict and fighting left the city in ruins after the war ended. It is estimated that 190,000 buildings, 50,000 houses, and over 1,000 factories were destroyed during the war. Not only that, but Seoul had many refugees coming into the city from the north, growing the population to 2.5 million, more than half of whom were homeless at the end of the war. After the war, Seoul remained the capital of South Korea and became the focus of a major reconstruction and modernization campaign starting in the 1960s. In just a few short decades, Seoul went from a relatively small city decimated by war to having the third largest metropolitan area in the world and a nominal GDP of over $380 billion, which is higher than the entire country of Portugal. Today, Seoul remains one of the most prosperous cities in Asia. Seoul is also a global leader in all things technology. Even as a modern advanced city, Seoul still holds on to its remnants of its past. The city has 5 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, 115 museums, shrines, and ancient Buddhist temples. In summary, Seoul has changed over many centuries. It is one of the most populated cities in the world and will continue to grow because of its flourishing economic system.